Before we get into today's episode, listeners, I just want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we couldn't bring you this podcast. So today we have two sponsors, the first of which is restaurant.com. With restaurant.com, you can save at thousands of restaurants across the country with just a few clicks. Their dining deals range from $5 to $100. They never expire, and they cost a fraction of the face value. Dinner has never been easier with restaurant.com, used for dine-in, takeout, or delivery. Restaurant.com is offering our listeners 50% off their next purchase by going to www.restaurant.com/podcast. That's www.restaurant.com/podcast for 50% off your next purchase. Restaurant.com, the best deal every meal. And our second sponsor for this episode is Nightcap, the drink spiking prevention scrunchie. Do you ever feel uncomfortable at a bar with your drink exposed? Are you someone who covers their drink with their hand or their napkin? Now you don't have to. Nightcap is a fun solution to a serious problem. It can be worn as a wristband or a hair tie and taken out to cover up your drink at any time. According to alcohol.org, 56% of women have reported having their drink spiked at some point. It's time to take action with Nightcap. With the holidays coming up, giving Nightcap to a friend or a loved one is the perfect way to show that you care about their safety. Go to nightcapit.com, that's NIGHTCAPIT.com, and enter the code BARTALK, all capital letters with a space in between bar and talk, for 20% off your order, valid until November 31st. And now, let's get into the podcast. Welcome back, Inebri-arts. This is Andy of the Inebri-art Podcast, and I'm actually really excited today because I get to talk to someone, or two people, sorry, not just someone, that I listen to all the time. And we've been reaching out to some other creative forces, some YouTubers and podcasters. So today I am joined by Blake Smith and Karen Stollznow. Did I get that right? Close?
That'll do.
From MonsterTalk, the science show about monsters. Correct?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
So,
thank you for having us here.
Oh,
Absolutely.
no problem. Thank you. I was actually really surprised at how quickly you guys got back to me and were like, oh, we'll definitely come on the show. It's great. So I have to admit, Fish here turned me onto your show initially, and at the time I'm like, I have too many podcasts that I'm listening to, and I ran out at work one day and I'm like, I'll give it a try.
Aw.
And and I was hooked, man. Like I really love the way you guys are formatted, where it's you start from a basis of skepticism and kind of go from there, but you don't poo-poo anything.
Nope. Yeah, exactly. We're very open and friendly and loving and empathetic.
Yeah. I think we're very interested in history and folklore and culture as well. So we're attracted to science and skepticism by way of having an interest in the paranormal and
also
science and all of these things.
I don't think I've ever described us as loving before. I think that's the vodka talking. Sorry.
Indeed.
But no, I think it's really interesting. And like, it's always been, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, like, oh, are you going to believe in monsters at the end of this? And I'm like, no, man, like, probably not.
Probably not. Yeah. Yeah.
But I've always been, but I've always been intrigued by it. And I was thinking the other night, I'm like, what was my earliest interest? And I kind of traced it back to Ripley's Believe It or Not was like my jam as a kid. Like, I loved that show, and it was weird and macabre. And
do you remember who the host was when you watched it?
Oh God, it was the dude from City Slickers that played Curly.
Jack Palance.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. They revived it, didn't they? With
he of the one-arm push-up. Yeah, I think there was a 70s version for some reason. I don't remember.
Oh, really?
There may have been more. There may have been even more versions. And yeah, I think there's a newer version.
I think there was a newer with maybe Dean Cain.
Dean Cain. Yes. So yeah,
but not the same. at all.
No. Well, it's like they've redone In Search Of, and they've got Zachary Quintel, but it's not the same show, not even close.
So what was it that first turned you guys on to this topic?
Go first, Karen?
I think for both of us, it was a similar experience to you. And I grew up in Australia, Sydney, Australia. And so we had a lot of American television and British television. And I remember being 5 years old and watching In Search Of, the original series, obviously. And watching shows like Ripley's Believe It or Not. I remember seeing an episode of that and hearing about the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose and hearing about the Door to Nowhere. And I thought, one day I'm going to see that place. And so I think it was a whole series of events, books that I read too. Recently, we interviewed Christopher Maynard, the author of the Usborne Book of Ghosts, Unknown, from the 1970s. And so I grew up on that book, and I just think in general, I was drawn to anything about ghosts and psychics and UFOs and monsters, and that interest has just grown over the years, and it seems to be a really common interest for a lot of people too.
Now, were you always skeptical about it, or was that a more recent kind of change?
People often don't believe me when I tell them, but I think I was. I remember watching E.T. when it was on at the movies, and I was about 5, which tells you my age. And I remember afterwards asking my mother, do aliens really exist? And she said, oh, yes, they do. And I was skeptical. I remember thinking, I don't know if this is true. And at the same time, I'd hear ghost stories from friends, and I always questioned them. And I questioned my parents about I shouldn't give any spoilers here, but about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. And
oh man, Blake, I'm sorry.
Sorry to break it to you this way. I've been trying to avoid this for 10 years. But
come on, if Santa Claus isn't real, why would I even be good? That doesn't even make any sense.
You don't want to upset the Easter Bunny, Blake.
Oh yeah, there's that.
Okay.
Yeah, I even remember we had a guinea pig named Lucky who wasn't so lucky and passed, and yet my parents were trying to tell me that he was still alive. And so I think I just had a natural skepticism. And growing up in Australia too, people tend to be a little cynical, tend to kind of poo-poo things. That doesn't mean that I don't try to be open-minded, and that's certainly something that I share with Blake. We like to keep an open mind, and to, you know, if we don't know something, to readily admit that. But I just think it was a whole series of things that happened to me as a kid, and but I really do think I was naturally skeptical, whereas my parents not so much.
And what about you, Blake?
Oh, I grew up in a really religious family that believed in very literal Bible and lots of miracles. And I was just always fascinated by the supernatural, which in my parents' view was always demonic. Like there weren't ghosts, there's just demons. Everything's a demon, right? And I think I started getting a little skeptical until I got in the Navy, and then I had some experiences that felt supernatural, like very supernatural. And I thought that I was being attacked by ghosts. I thought I had sort of poltergeisty-like effects going on. And then after several years of fearful sleep, I learned about this thing called sleep paralysis. That it explained pretty much all the weird stuff that was going on in my life. And after I learned about that, I just really dug into scientific explanations for hauntings and that sort of stuff. And when I ran into Karen, she was the first grown-up I'd ever met who knew about Jeff the Talking Mongoose. And so, I mean, we had lots of other things in common, but that really struck me as being the sign of true insight. You know what I mean? I mean, like,
now, I gotta ask,
real awareness.
That's, I feel like I'm pretty well versed on stuff, but I've never heard. Fish, do you know Jeff the Talking? Well, did you guys do an episode?
Yeah, because I've heard of the episode.
Oh, so I have not heard that.
We talk about him often.
We do.
So
he's almost like the unofficial mascot, right? So yeah.
So who was Jeff talking to?
Voyery, you know, little girl. So
okay.
So yeah, this dates back to the last century, and there were these claims that came out of the Isle of Man, so off the coast of England, and there's this story that came out about this little girl who had befriended a mongoose, and he could talk, And he said his name was Jeff, and there were a whole series of experiences that the family had with this character, and even photographs of him. A time where he bit the father's finger, and then said, told him to go and put some ointment on it, and so all these interactions that Jeff had with the family.
He was like, before Kanye West, he was the most braggadocious figure in media. I think he really bragged a lot.
Did he have his own clothing line? And
he would have, if he were around today. He would.
Yeah. So that's just a fun story, and his name is Jeff with a G, G-E-F.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone wants to go and Google it.
See, I think the weirdest thing is, one, he spells Jeff with a G, which no one does ever,
except for him.
The lead singer of Jeff Tate, Operation Mindcrime.
Well, there's GEOFF, but this is just this is just GEF. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which
that's what I'm saying.
Spelling's not my strong point.
Spelling of
That's
Jeff.
weird.
And also, it's a mongoose, which for 1930s England is incredibly odd because it's not.
He's like he's an out of place animal, right? Like they have
very out of place.
You hear these things like ABCs, which are alien big cats. They're large predator cats in the wrong place. They don't belong there biologically.
Yeah, like panthers in Australia or something like that.
He's the only mongoose I'm aware of like that. Yeah.
So is he an ABG?
Alien big cats, ABCs. Yeah.
But I mean, to some extent, the stories have been disproved, and there were photographs of Jeff, and so people who've analysed those photographs say that Jeff looks very much like a toy that was made, I think, out of Germany at the time and placed on a wooden fence. But anyway, it's an interesting story.
It is. But as a kid, it haunted me because if you read the story as a child, and it's in that Usborne. Yeah,
Osborne. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Still don't know.
Yeah, it's still. We should have asked. That would have been a good question. So, but it's in this children's book, and then it's also like gotten very serious academic treatment among the parapsychologists, right? Like really serious adults looked into it. And at the same time, really serious adults were like, well, of course that's nonsense, right? Like, obviously it's nonsense. But at the same time, the people proposing it, Voira, is it Voiri? Voiri, right?
Voiri, it's Manx for Mary.
Yeah, it's Voiri Irving. And the Irving family, they treated it very seriously. And so it got serious adult investigations by serious scientists. One of the scientists was the same guy who did the I'm losing my mind. This is terrible. Hold on a second.
Jumping Jack Flash, wasn't it? Or
no, I'm trying to think of it. Was Nando Fodor.
At the time.
And then
Harry Price.
Harry Price, thank you. This is me turning 51. I turned 51 like a day ago, or 2 days ago. So
what?
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
51. Thank you. Yeah.
You're not on Facebook anymore, so I
know, right? Nobody gets the prompts, but yeah. I just turned 51, and there went my memory. But yeah, Harry Price. And I was trying to think of the most haunted house in England, the Borley Rectory. Yeah, so he's more famous for Borley Rectory, but this other case is in his casebook. He wrote a whole book about it, The Haunting of Cashin's Gap. I think. I don't know. It's just very cool.
So at what point did you decide that this would make an interesting podcast, and how did you get intrigued into podcasts in general?
This was Blake's idea. I met him at DragonCon in 2009, and he raised the idea with me, and we just stayed in contact, and we had a lot of common interests across topics in skepticism. And so this is really Blake's baby, and he has been the producer and the host, and he's put this together, and if it wasn't for him, the show would not exist.
Thank you. I'm a nerd. It just I actually had a little bit of background when I was in the Navy. I tried to cross-rate to journalist. I was a machinist mate and a law enforcement 9545 security agent, and the whole time I was in the Navy, I wanted to be a journalist. I just thought it was the coolest idea to be a journalist working inside the military. And so I did some radio work and I did a lot of training around how journalism works and how to be a journalist. And then my background was in English, but then I moved into IT. So if you combine all those things, you have IT experience, broadcast experience, and writing experience. When podcasting appeared, it was like, here's how to get my puns out to the bigger audience. So yeah.
And I gotta say, you were obviously well known for your puns, and they come out so quick that I'm like, is he editing out parts where he's thinking about it?
No, this is natural.
Yeah, it's organic. Yeah.
And
he's amazing.
Amazing or tormenting,
or I think the word pathological is
that's the word. There you go. But it's that kind of thing that
I'm trying to refrain, but of course I am.
But I mean, it gives that show like flavor. Like that's kind of what you expect when you listen. Is it something you warn guests about ahead of time?
Actually, lately we sort of have, yeah.
Sometimes they kind of fall into the trap and they're introduced into a pun, and then I need to make apologies.
Yes,
and say that we should have warned the guest. And
there
is
ugly.
That. Sometimes they laugh.
Occasionally, yeah.
I can't remember which one I was listening to the other day, and it was almost like you had to mention, like he took you way too seriously, like you said something, and he tried to correct you, and you were like, "That was like a pun."
Yeah, right.
that happens.
That happens. It's something that's been in my life a long time. Like I've always been involved in wordplay, and I actually have a lot of wordplay I do outside of puns, but puns fit very nicely into the show. I try to steer away. Like the worst habit I have, like the more pathological thing, is sarcasm. But like the sarcasm, I'm very concerned about the tone of the show. And if I'm sarcastic about something that I'm as serious about as critical thinking, it basically gives people who want to be dismissive of skeptics. It gives them like, oh, look at them, look at their arrogance, look at their sarcasm, and it's like, that's not me. I mean, in all seriousness, even though I don't believe in these things, I take them very seriously, and I'm very respectful of people who have different beliefs from me. And so I try to steer away from sarcasm on the show. I could do that. Snark is actually very popular, but it's popular with exactly half the audience, or it very much divides the audience.
Yeah, it's popular with the half that believes the same thing you believe.
And I love poetry and word, poems and rhyming and basically everything to do with words.
Yeah.
So yeah, but puns really works well within the format. So.
Yeah, I love it because like it makes me think of dad jokes, and I love making dad jokes to my kids.
Yeah,
and, yeah.
You have no idea how much it bothers my kids. So yeah,
we do.
So, what do you have a favorite dad joke or pun that you roll out to your kids?
No. I mean, as you mentioned about the show, I mean, typically I try to do them organically. Yeah. I think over the course of the show, there's really only been one that I had ahead of time. That I think it's just one. I think one time in 10 years of doing the show, I thought of a joke before the show and then worked it in. It's just really not.
I can't even remember which episode that was now.
It was the Dean Cain episode. We were talking to the co-hosts of Dean Cain on the $10 million Bigfoot bounty. It was Natalia Reagan and Todd Dishotel. And they had done the show with Dean Cain, and Dean Cain had been on the Superman TV show with Lois and Clark. And before the show that we recorded, I came up with this terrible pun, and then I basically sprang it on the guests like a trap, and it was horrible, but it was good. Which is, I asked them, I said, when you were filming the show, the $10 million Bigfoot bounty, did Dean Cain have any problems with the night shoots? With the shoot? And they were like, yeah, how did you know? And I was like, well, I had always heard that his weakness was cryptid nights.
I can't believe you remember that.
How can you forget that? That's amazing.
It's the only one that I remember, that ever came up outside the show. It's just weird. So,
but I remember we normally have a Google Doc and we work together and kind of chat as we're doing the interview and have a list of questions and discussion points. And I remember he had that pun in there and
Yep.
was urging for his opportunity to make that pun.
So when you guys record, that you have an open Google Doc that you kind of talk back and forth between?
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
That's interesting.
That's the way we've been
in the
doing it
little
for years.
chat that's built in. It would be really hard for us to do the show without that. It's such a great collaboration platform.
Well, we use Skype as well to record the interviews, and so we could use that too. But Google Docs is very good.
Yeah,
it's been a really interesting year because prior to COVID, we never recorded remotely. We always recorded in person. It was kind of like I'm like, oh, I never really liked the sound quality of the remotely recorded podcast, and then we stumbled across Zoom, and I'm like, sound quality is actually pretty good, and if we want to keep it going, it's the only way to do it. So I'm actually pretty happy. I think I'm going to keep doing it.
It would be the only way for us, with me being in Denver and
right,
like being in Atlanta. So
yeah,
we couldn't record in person.
Be a hell of a commute.
Yeah.
But you can bring me dessert, Karen.
Or she could take it to that beer place. That sounds pretty
well,
sweet.
I'm saying she could bring me brownies.
Make me a Moscow.
Okay, I got you. So is there a particular cryptid that you haven't attacked yet? Or because I feel like you guys have done more than just cryptids now too, kind of talked aliens and other topics.
We've really broadened our definition of monster to include humans. So we did an episode about a year ago on Adolf Hitler, and we did an episode on Rasputin. That can include legendary creatures and cryptids, or existing animals that are just interesting. Recently, we did an episode on cane toads.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to do that for some time too, and it's quite remarkable. I often tell this story, but when we just started out, I had a friend of mine say, "How many shows can you do on Bigfoot?" And he thought it wouldn't last very long. And no, here we are 10 years later, and how many episodes? About over 200.
Yeah, we're pushing. We've got. I think we have almost 220 in the can. So, but I think 216 have been out, maybe 217, something like that.
Nice.
Yeah. So not all Bigfoot. We've really been able to tackle so many topics, and we still have a long list of topics that we'd like to treat.
Right. We're trying to get more global too. We did the Chinese ghost stories, where there's so many cool monsters around the world, and we've been very Euro Western. It's Western centric, I think, and we're trying to kind of. And that's not because we're not interested. It's sometimes we have a hard time finding guests who are experts on these other topics.
Sure.
We did a show on Japanese ghosts a few years ago, and I had someone contact me maybe in July and say, "Are you going to interview someone about Chinese ghosts for Chinese Ghost Month?" And I was like, "Oh,
there's a Chinese Ghost Month?
Yeah, there's a Chinese Ghost Month, and so that's apparently August." And so we found a guest, and her name escapes me right now.
What?
But Ming, I can't remember. But so we're
Minwei Huang.
Okay,
I think is the way it's pronounced. I wrote it down phonetically.
Minwei, yes, Minwei, yes. And so we're not running short of ideas.
Yeah, I figure once you include something like ghosts, you could do oodles and oodles of episodes about.
Well, there's this whole thing about like Chinese ghost stories. There was like her episode was about the literature, which is Jiguai.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because it's the same sort of thing where people are taking folklore and turning it into written fiction. And then there's pushback from that because that's just folk tales. That's not true art. Right. Mm-hmm. And it actually conflicted with the cultural, dominant cultural paradigm at the time, which was Confucianism. It's a very interesting discussion. So like there's the question of, are ghosts real? But then there's the question of whether they're real or not, they have a real cultural impact. And that sort of that was a really fun discussion of how the people who were interested in these stories, again, whether they're real or not, they're interested in these stories and telling these stories, which is an art form. It's a part of culture. It's a part of human psychology. It's a part of mythology. It's like monsters are such a cool platform from which to examine the human experience. And I think that's what we've really learned over 10 years of doing this is, we can talk about critical thinking and science and using monsters as that sort of seed for the topic. It's just really powerful narratively.
There's so many different angles too for every topic.
Why do you think that people, and this is partially from personal experience, why do you think people jump to a supernatural explanation opposed to a logical real world explanation? And so we just recorded an episode for one of our other shows at it's called The Old Jail. It's in Barnstable, Mass. It's the oldest wooden jail cell in the United States, and it's, you know, it's supposed to be haunted. So we were there at night, and a friend of ours took a photo and someone's face was blurred out, and we're like, yeah, they used a long shutter exposure and the person moved.
Yeah.
And I showed it to a friend of mine. She goes, no, that's a ghost. And I'm like, no, I just, you know, like it baffles me that it seems to be people's first explanation.
Oh, can I tackle this one, Karen? If you don't mind me? My personal belief is that critical thinking and sort of rational basis for argument is not natural. It's a technology, and it has to be taught. And if you don't have that technology, then the natural explanation is to jump to the supernatural, because it's easier to explain a mystery with it was X and that's the answer than it is to actually break it down granularly, logically, rationally. That's not a natural way of thinking. I don't know what it was. It was a monster is much more natural than I don't know what it was. My mind is putting together a story, and I have to understand psychology and you know, the need for causation, like that there's like that vacuum if we don't know. And it's far easier to fill it in with a monster, a ghost, or witch than it is to like actually understand the problems of human perception.
Yeah, I would have to agree that it's socialization, and certainly with the kinds of reality TV and other shows that people watch. And also, I think that it's more fun for a lot of people to think, I had a ghost sighting, instead of thinking that it's some kind of natural hallucination for whatever reason. To think that they've experienced a ghost sighting is far more fun and exciting than a mundane natural explanation.
And we've come a long way too, but I was going to say we've I think in the 10 years we've been doing the show, we've been doing a lot of our own personal research into how the brain works, and you know, what are the latest information we have about perception and psychology, and that stuff's always evolving. But I think it's pushing towards a materialist explanation for consciousness and perception, and the way those things like biases, like the more psychology digs into things about human bias and human perception and the way that our beliefs affect the way we understand things, I think that gives us a better picture of how we behave, but it doesn't answer all the underlying questions that for individuals still roll back on the systems they have. So they roll back on the belief systems they have and the stories they have and the cultural things. And that's all they're ever going to do unless they all take the time to learn all this new psychology stuff. And I you know, it's always going to be with us. I think it's much more easy to live that way, and you can live a full life without ever looking into critical thinking. I mean, like we survived millions of years, and definitely culture has survived for hundreds of thousands of years without those systems. And so that this is all new stuff, you know, trying to understand it. And being a skeptic is unnatural, and it's hard, and it's not as fun in some ways.
I definitely understand the fun part, because like sometimes I see people and they'll be like, I mean, that photo is a perfect example. Is like, if I believed in a ghost, it'd be a much cooler story that I could share. Like when I'm out with friends, be like, "Ooh, look at this scary photo," and that, like, I look at it now and go, it's a messed up photo."
Yeah. And that's another thing too. We tend to not just say ghosts don't exist or psychics don't exist, but to look at individual cases. And there are lots of opportunities for that kind of thing with people's claims, to look at the individual claims and to break those down, and to do some historical research, and to really look into a claim and assess its validity, rather than just saying, "Oh, this phenomenon doesn't exist." That would be wrong of us to take that kind of tactic.
So was this jail ghost taken with a camera or a cell phone?
It was a cell phone, and it was on like a night
mobile phone.
Yeah. Sorry, mobile phone for our.
I meant jail cell phone, right?
Yeah,
So-
Oh, Jesus. How did I miss that?
You were going to ban him if he made puns.
I know. That was kind of like,
over.
honestly, that was me trying to like kind of poke the bear and hoping. And then earlier I'm like, oh, you make puns and people don't notice. And I did the exact same thing.
And he slips it in.
Yeah.
They should have photos of these people being punished. Stock photos.
Oh. Interview's over.
That's pretty good. So I actually sent Fish an article I stumbled across yesterday. Have you guys seen that there was a new Mothman sighting?
No.
Yeah, it was at a USPS.
In what state?
Oh crap!
Illinois.
Illinois.
So this is tied to the new Chicago sightings.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is this from Lon Strickler's site, or is it like?
Do you have it there in front of you, Fish?
Give me a sec.
It was a United States Postal Service worker at an airport. I think was like leaving or something, and saw it in a parking lot.
Like you do.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we did one episode on a couple of years ago now, I think, with Alison Jolman on the Chicago Mothman.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Lon Strickler's been, I guess, accruing these stories and sort of publicizing them on his site. And then Allison went out and did like some on-site investigations. And I mean, I would say Allison is a good critical thinker, but she's also very much she is very open to the idea that ghosts are real.
Mm-hmm.
And but she did tremendous work on this, doing the footwork, which we love to do as well. But I would that I lived in a world where I could go to Chicago and hang out, look for Mothman. That would be fantastic. The food in Chicago is so good. Oh my God.
That sounds like my kind of ghost or cryptid hunt,
I have so many friends who live there too, and it's just such a great city. So yeah, I'm envious on like 20 levels. But yeah. No, I hadn't heard about this latest sighting, but yeah, Lon Strickler's been collecting these, sort of aggregating them. As I look at Monster Flaps, I noticed that the role of these people who do this sort of collection, they basically form. Like they become the historians of the outbreak, and so they collect the stories and they kind of automatically cause there to be a monster flap. Like the fact that they're looking for and collecting all the stories, whether there's many or not, makes it a monster flap. As they publicize it, people feel free to explain their sighting by that same explanation, so like whatever
copycat sightings.
And as soon as there's something to look for, you're going to see it.
You look for it, right? It raises the attention levels. So I think there's a little sort of perpetual notion engine in play there. So
well, it's kind of, I mean, you guys have talked about it a lot on your show, the idea of, something happens in cinema and then somewhere down the line, people start reporting it. Like I never heard talk of, reptilian aliens interfering with our government prior to V.
Yeah.
And even locally here, we just recorded an episode about the Bridgewater Triangle.
Oh yeah.
And because Fish lives smack dab in the middle of it.
Oh really? Wow.
I mean, look at him.
Thanks.
Is that also the home of the Pukwudgie?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so we were talking with this guy who wrote a book on it, and he started talking about zombies and zombies being seen there, and I'm like, I've never heard anyone ever mention that, and I was wondering if it was just kind of like an offshoot from like The Walking Dead and zombies being in popular culture.
I've also never heard of Bridgewater Triangle zombies. But,
it was like
why not?
Sure, I mean it has everything else. So I was like,
I was watching one of those episodes of Paranormal Celebrity Stories a couple of weeks ago, and I can't remember who the actor was, but he spoke about some town, and I wish I could remember the specific details, but he'd gone through a town in England on his honeymoon. And he and his wife had come across a town full of zombies.
So wow, a whole town.
This goes back a whole town. They said that they were driving through and they had just a very eerie sensation that people seemed to be kind of staggering in the way that they walked and wouldn't make eye contact. And
they were in Ireland. That's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah, they were drunk.
Yeah.
But so I can't remember the name of this town, but apparently it's well known as being a zombie town. But yeah, absolutely. I think even recently we were doing an interview and just talking about the black-eyed kids and just all of these other kinds of sightings that people have had subsequent to TV shows or movies.
Now, when you guys are watching something on Netflix, like if you watch Stranger Things, are you now like, okay, when is the sighting of the upside down creatures going to start? Or like, do you ever kind of like watch something and be like, are we going to start to see cryptids of that nature?
I don't think I've ever predicted anything like that. I think we just kind of start paying attention to the stories as they come out. But I don't know. How about you, Blake?
At times, the thing, but that's not from being a skeptic. That's from watching too many horror movies. I mean, I watch a lot of horror movies and paranormal television. So I would say that there's the thrill of recognition throughout Stranger Things in the way that they sort of blend together a variety of 80s horror fiction and sci-fi concepts with stuff like the Montauk Project. There's just a ton of stuff in there. I mean, obviously, if you've ever watched the movie Firestarter or read the book, there's just so many connections to that. And if you've read, and then Stephen King himself was drawing from stuff like the CIA's research into brainwashing and mind control. So MK Ultra and that sort of stuff. So
we just came across a great fact about MK Ultra. We were doing an episode about Whitey Bulger, and apparently Whitey Bulger volunteered to be part of MK Ultra to reduce his jail sentence.
Yeah, during prison. I heard that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. I'm like, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that there are cycles for a lot of this phenomena as well. You go through periods where people are really interested in ghosts, and then that kind of ebbs, and then you have an interest in UFOs. So there is this kind of always seems to be this cycle of different topics.
And
Stephen King talked about the cycle of the werewolf. So yeah, it's all connected. So
I think that's really true, because I mean, like the 80s, I remember it was all vampires all the time. And,
well, that's Anne Rice's fault, right? So
and Lost Boys, and
well, the Lost Boys too. Yeah. So Joel Schumacher, yeah, absolutely, and the Frog Brothers, good times. And muscular saxophone players, exactly.
Of course, and you guys now have like a Patreon, and
we do patreon.com/MonsterTalk. Thanks for your support.
So and you have a show for your Patreon members where you watch Bigfoot movies.
I do big footage. Yeah. That's
is that something that you now look back going, oh, I'm really happy I did this, or why did I do this to myself?
Well, I don't know
he would do this anyway.
I watched them anyway. You're absolutely right. I would watch them anyway. That came out of like a year ago. Was it just a year ago? It seems like a million years ago. But at Dragon Con, the horror track, Derek Tatum was the track runner, and he invited me to be on a panel about Bigfoot movies. He listens to the show, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll watch all 12 Bigfoot movies. I'll be ready for this panel. And then it turns out there's more than 200. Holy crap. And so I got really excited. I thought there's a potential here for me to like have an excuse to watch these movies. And also give the patrons something a little extra. And honestly, I really love the work we do on Monster Talk. So I don't want to like hold back our like important research or discussions with authors. I don't want to keep that behind a paywall. But my reaction to horrible Bigfoot movies, that could be paywalled. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So well, you recently put out a like bonus episode, like a intro or a sample of it, right?
I did. Yeah. I did that. So far, I don't want to call it the worst Bigfoot movie I've ever seen, because I know there's worse ones out there, but
there are lots of worst ones.
Yeah, there's
like the most haunted house in
it's
America.
Like the most haunted. Exactly. There's many most haunted houses. There's a lot of really terrible Bigfoot movies, but Night of the Demon, not to be confused with Curse of the Demon or Night of the Demons, This is Night of the Demon. It was made in 79, but the movie, if you find it on Prime, it'll be like 83. It's a treat. It's the only Bigfoot movie I've seen so far that combines like folklore, slasher movies, porno, and Lovecraftian horror. It's amazing. So
now, on the scale of 10 to Manos, the Hands of Fate, like where does it fall?
Oh, it's deep into Manos territory.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely a movie.
Terrible.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, you can see where every one of their $20 was spent making this movie, but it's painful. I think what hurts me about this movie is you can see what they were trying to do. Like you can see what it was meant to be. And it was a really earnest effort by exploitative 1970s filmmakers to try to put together something that people would go to the drive-in to watch.
Yeah.
But it just misses time and time again. And yet it's got so much stuff in it that you watch it and it's almost like Evil Dead 2 in its level of violence. I mean, it's full frontal male nudity. It's honestly, I really, really like the soundtrack, but the audio is so muddy you can't enjoy it. It's a flawed. Oh man, it's something. It's like a failed souffle, right? It's like you can see all the quality ingredients in there, but it's just fucked up. Like
it's like that bad thing that you eat and you have to share with someone.
Yeah,
you're like, here,
honey,
try this. It's
great.
terrible.
Yeah. No. Can I have some more? No, it's horrible. Right?
Okay, I found it on Amazon. First of all, I have no idea how the movie you just described still has over 3 stars. I don't.
That's because people who watch it were drunk. Well,
I got plans for later then. Yeah. So it's read reviews that mention Night of the Demon, Code Red, Boggy Creek, special effects, sleeping bag, and then it gets fun. Gratuitous nudity, bad acting, Crazy Wanda, Girl Scouts.
Crazy Wanda, very important part of the film.
Crazy Wanda. I'm watching this as soon as we get off.
I mean, you're not going to regret it. It's not anything. I
think you will. Yeah.
I've regretted worse.
As I like to call them, in the before times, I would have loved to have friends over to watch this. It
sounds like it'd be fun to watch with a group of people while you're drinking.
There is this one scene of there's a porn scene in this movie, like straight out of Skinamax. But as shot, I mean, I swear to God, like when I was growing up, my mom would be like, don't let them pull you into a custom van. You don't want to be in a custom van. Like, I don't know what she thought was going on. Like for years, I was like, what did she think was happening in this custom van? And now I know. Everything that happens in this movie is exactly what my mom thought was going on.
Oh, my God.
So it is something.
That's amazing.
But we are doing a couple of sideline projects too. For a while, when the pandemic began, back in those early months, we were doing live episodes of Monster Talk, and so that we could have interaction with the listeners. And we've also been doing a series too called Based on a True Story, in which we look at movies such as The Exorcist or The Hills Have Eyes or The Changeling. Yep. So we go and watch the movie, usually revisiting it because it's something we've seen decades ago, and then look at the ghost stories or the claims and the folklore, and then look at the reality of what really happened or didn't happen, as the case may be. So
those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've been doing that, and we've been trying to really expand on our YouTube channel too. And my husband, Matt Baxter, has been getting involved in this too. And we get a lot of people sending in photographs of ghosts and videos of various.
I have a photo of a ghost.
Well, please send it in. Send it in, and lots of TikTok stuff too.
Yeah.
TikTok aliens and UFOs, and he does little analyses of these and for YouTube, and just kind of bite-sized skepticism. I was just going to say we've had a few personal issues going on at the moment with some family problems, but we've been wanting to make more of those because I mean he's pretty much every day getting evidence from people and who are wanting to get his take on things. And his background is that he did belong to a ghost hunting group, which is something that Blake and I have never really done. We've always tackled these things from a skeptical perspective. But his background, even though he is a skeptic, he comes from more of that ghost busting, ghost hunting background. So his interpretations are sometimes interesting.
And I haven't had much fun, or no, wrong word. I haven't had much luck joining ghost hunting groups. I've tried.
Normally, I've been booted out.
Yeah, but yeah, I've like pre-booted.
Too many puns. They're like, get out.
Well, see, that's what I don't know. Do they look at my profile and say, "Oh, skeptic," or do they look at it and go, "What the pun? What?" Either way,
he didn't have a K2 meter, so they
right.
Exactly.
Oh, that's yeah. We like I said, we just recorded at that old jail, and so we were sitting in there doing the EVP session, and you don't know what the hell to ask, and so we're just trying to do the generic, are you mad we're here? And Fish decided to take the snarky asshole ghost hunter, and it was really funny.
Look, it's something I'm
Baiting
sure
the ghosts.
that they had never. Oh, not like at the whole ghost come at me, bro kind of thing.
yeah.
Because
you
that
read
just
that,
seems.
did you?
I'm familiar with the show. But like just that sense of, I'm just going to ask weird questions because why not? Like, I'm not going to get an answer, but at least this way, maybe I'll catch one of them off guard.
Yeah, basically he was heckling. It was pretty great.
Well, I was watching something recently. It was a video about Borley Rectory, and this ghost hunting couple had gone, and they didn't go to Borley Rectory. Obviously, it doesn't exist anymore. It was burnt down decades ago. But they went to the church that was next door, and they were talking to the headstones in the cemetery and just saying the most ridiculous things like, do you want us to stay? And if not, tell us to go. And the choice is yours. And the decision is yours. And it was like, what the hell? I mean, you're talking to lumps of stone here. This is crazy.
Oh, I felt totally foolish because you're like, I'm just talking to an empty room, and it was.
How did you die? And
yeah, how many of you here? What is your name? And why were you sent to this jail? That kind of thing. But it was very, I don't know, kind of canned questions, which isn't my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, it's hard to have a dynamic conversation with someone who doesn't answer. Yeah.
I've had those podcasts. Trust me.
So have we.
Yeah, they're rough, man. Like so what was your favorite show you've ever played? Oh man, I don't know. Okay, yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, those are never fun. So do
you have a favorite episode? Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So when things go back to normal, are you looking to do more stuff for your YouTube channel? Like, are you gonna visit places, or like, what's the plan for the quote unquote new normal?
I don't think there is a plan, is there?
Yeah, both of our lives are in a little bit of tumultuous state right now, but I definitely see more YouTube stuff in the future.
Yeah, we definitely want to do that, and we're really enjoying the Based on a True Story and doing these little Ask a Paranormal Investigator videos. So yeah, there'll be more YouTube and just more of the same too with Monster Talk and our interviews, and we've got a number of interviews that we've done for Halloween, and just a bunch in the can at the moment. And I think it's just we still have so many topics that we want to treat, and we're
for sure
still trying to find experts to talk to.
Yeah, and some of our experts are also tied up in weird situations because of the situation out there. But I've got some really good potential episode on the Yeti that I want to do from people who've actually worked in Nepal and Tibet, and have a better handle on. I think there's a tendency for some of these stories to come through the cultural filter of cryptozoology, which I'm more and more beginning to believe is inherently a colonialist approach to this stuff. Like, there's this natural tendency to take native people's stories and turn them into westernized, scientific reality, versus treating them as part of this native culture from a religious cultural perspective or folkloric cultural perspective or whatever. Just everything doesn't have to be flesh and blood, real creatures. And I think there's skeptical materialist ways to look at that we're trying to examine. And then we're also dealing with the fact that there's a big chunk of the people who used to believe in traditional cryptozoology who have now sort of flipped into paranormal cryptozoology. I don't know if it has a a special name, but there's
Interdimensional Bigfoot.
Extra-dimensional Bigfoot.
I loved it. It's so great. I love that.
It frustrates the pelts and paws. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bigfoot portal. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah. So
fun claims.
It's fun, bizarre. But it also represents a breakdown in the sort of materialist seriousness of cryptozoology. I think when that basically moves it off into spirituality, which is also happening UFOs. I think it's a big challenge. Yes. Yeah, I think it's a big challenge because if you're a skeptic, but how do you investigate something that is necessarily ultradimensional and spiritual, right? I mean, it becomes a religious question rather than a scientific question.
How do you verify the unverifiable?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's to me, it's got to be frustrating for them. So like, if I was a Bigfoot hunter, to have someone come along and be like, "No, it's an extra dimensional, creature," I'd be, like, "Shut up, get out of the meeting." You're not helping. Kind of
right.
Is there that kind of mentality amongst them where there's kind of infighting?
Oh yeah, but also I think infighting or no, it's a growing part of the population. It's a growing viewpoint. And you have people like the Tom DeLonge group, the is it ATIP or his is not, it's not ATIP. That's the government thing. It's the other thing. I forgot what his group's called all of a sudden. Sorry.
Blink 182.
Well, nicely done. Yeah, to the Stars Academy. It came back to me. But yeah, they're definitely taking a non-physical material view. They're absolutely leaning into the potential of an ultradimensional / spiritual explanation for all this stuff. And I think the same thing's happening in cryptozoology. That's been my perception, that there's a big chunk of cryptozoology that's now leaning into the sort of John Keel ultra-terrestrial stuff. And it definitely rubs the natural, biology people the wrong way. So I don't think it's the kind of schism that'll destroy cryptozoology. I think what we're really seeing is an evolution, not a civil war.
Well, I think there's infighting in all groups too. I mean, we've seen a lot of infighting within skepticism or atheism, and just to see through my husband's eyes, him having belonged to paranormal groups, there's a lot of infighting with those groups too. I think it's just anytime you get a bunch of humans together, you'll get conflict. And
I mean, my go-to story is on a road trip across the U.S. I took my family. We drove through Falk, Arkansas, the home of the Boggy Creek monster, and on the way into that little town, I mean, there's just not that many people in the town. I want to say it's the population's like 800, and we saw more than 5 different variations of Protestant churches for a town with like 800 people. It was like, what, y'all can't just agree on like the basics and just go to one church? I mean,
well, they did. They agreed on the basics of God, and then everything else is just kind of filler.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're like, oh no, they don't believe this, and no. I mean, we all believe in the basics, but I just can't tolerate being in a room with people who, will, go to celebrate Halloween. No, sir, cannot do that.
Yep. That's amazing.
So everybody's going to schism. It doesn't matter. It's nobody's immune to it. Even like the most rational people, we break up. But the harder thing is to find common ground, and the harder thing is to remember we're all in this together. And the harder thing is to be a humanist and to like try to find the things that bring us together. It's so easy to find divisiveness, and it's so hard to find that thread that we all need to work together for. And I believe in the power of humans to join together and do amazing things. And I also
through their love of monsters.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody's perfect, but I just really, really have high hopes that humanity can do better. So,
wow, that's such a serious tone to come from Blake. I'm kind of like,
well, I've had 2 vodkas now.
Oh, that's what it is. All right.
He's at that stage of the night. Yeah.
I love you guys. but seriously, it's so easy to get caught up right now. The media, I think in particular, is complicit in selling a narrative of divisiveness. And I say you have to rise above that and remember we all have more in common than we have apart. And it's such an obvious thing if you stop and think about it, but it's so easy to get caught up in that mentality of difference because it's easy to spot the difference, and it takes a little bit of effort to find the things we have in common. So.
That's right. We need to get Bigfoot and the Chupacabra and Loch Ness.
Just love each other, right?
Yeah.
It's like
We'll hold hands
and film it and sell the porn.
And there's the vodka.
Maybe
So,
not.
I'm gonna steal a question sort of from you guys. What is your least favorite monster?
Never been asked that, and so haven't thought about it. I think Blake and I have not often, but occasionally spoken about the Loch Ness monster and getting a little bit bored of that, maybe to some extent. The lake monsters.
Truth. Yeah,
that's
the bee is silent.
I don't know, maybe because we have such a love for so many different kinds of stories. But yeah, maybe lake monsters, get a little bit tired of claims of rubbish bags floating down the river.
No, this is amazing because honestly, I don't think Karen and I have ever talked about this, but I totally agree. I have a serious difficulty. As a kid, I love lake monsters, and as an adult, I have a really hard time because no lake will support one biologically. They all just don't make any sense. And so the more rational I've become, the more jaded I've become around lake monster claims. And it's just disappointing. And so I think that disappointment has led to me basically resenting lake monsters. And I agree.
Wow, nice. So where can I list? Oh, sorry, were you going to answer?
I kind of wanted to ask a question. Do you think that kind of implausibility has kind of led to that rise of that ultradimensional monster issue? Because
take it somewhere else.
There have been monster reports from like Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
And Bridgewater. And I'm sorry, there is no way I can believe that a 7-foot tall hairy hominid is living in a fairly densely there are too many people around here. It'd have been hit by a car by now.
My personal take on this is that the ultradimensional explanation is on its face a form of special pleading. Well, of course, it can't fit into the biological model. That's because it's from another dimension, right? It's like a special explanation. Yeah. It's Carl Sagan's invisible dragon. It's it's this thing that it's a way of explaining things away, but it is also a way of explaining these things outside of a material, natural, human perception oriented sort of approach. So I think as someone who's spent a lot of time reading about how we perceive the world and biases and perceptual problems, Karen and I tend to understand that like the way we think we see the world and the way how much of the world perception we have is actually created in our mind versus what's literally coming into our eyeballs and ears. It's disappointing and disturbing. And if you don't know about that stuff, then ultradimensional creatures probably makes more sense. It's a lot easier. You don't have to put any reading into it. Like, 5 minutes of John Keel and you're good to go. You got it all explained, right? So
I think it's also that kind of showstopper kind of question or gotcha. We often encounter that with people who talk about their claims and so we'll give a possible explanation for something, and then they'll say, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And the claims just keep getting more and more bizarre. And so I do think, as Blake was saying too, this is a kind of natural evolution for this kind of thing to become more complicated, to become more spiritual.
I was talking today with someone about the Large Hadron Collider. They released something saying they were going to make contact with another dimension within the next few days. So maybe Bigfoot will be there to pick up the call.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
So where can our listeners go to find out more about you guys?
Well, you go to monstertalk.org if you don't want to pay anything, or you go to patreon.com/monstertalk if you love us. Yeah.
and you want to hear more about Bigfoot movies.
That's right. So, yeah.
If I could add to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, pretty much any podcasting platform. Just look for Monster Talk. Generally, we put it together as one word. I think you can sometimes find us with 2 words, but yeah.
Yeah.
And it's well worth the listen. I have to say thank you. You've given me hours of stuff to listen to, and I've always enjoyed your show.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. I think we're a little bit selfish about it in that we do the shows for ourselves and get to talk to.
I get that entirely.
But if other people want to listen into and something in it, that's great.
I always find that strange when people like review us or thank me or something, and I'm like, I'm just having fun. Like this is about me, not about you.
Yeah.
We've made so many fun connections. Yeah.
After all these years.
So again, I want to say thank you guys for taking the time out to talk to us. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, and
thank you. This was good fun. This was just like having a chat in a bar or something.
That's kind of what we shoot for. Yeah. So
I know I don't want to cause you a lot of extra editing, but Fish, what's that picture behind your head?
It's a dinosaur. Tell him it's a dinosaur. It really pisses him off.
That's really funny.
Dinosaur.
It's a Dimetrodon.
Okay. Is it from a movie? Like, is it one of the movies where they made one out of a lizard, or is it actually like a really one?
It's actually really out of focus today.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I'm very soft focused, and I don't know why.
I thought you were like maybe having a dream sequence. I don't.
No,
it's his Instagram filter.
It's just like old Star Trek where they put the Vaseline on the lens to make me look.
Oh
better.
Yeah, I mean, I usually have Vaseline on my lens for other reasons, but yeah.
Madonna does that too to look younger.
But no, it's an old Pyronol poster series I got when I was like 10, maybe.
Wow.
And it's just been on that wall for 20 years.
Your parents haven't made you take it down. That's nice. That's awesome.
That was fantastic. So that's pretty much it, guys. And thanks to everyone for listening. We'll see you guys here again next week.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or on Instagram at Inebri-art6. You can email us at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And make sure you listen to the other podcasts on the Inebri-art Podcast Network, including Bar Talk, Old Colony Cast, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror Podcast, and our newest one, Theme Park Legends, a podcast about working at theme parks. What else? And we'll catch you again next time.